Fantastic. So as Ustad Muhammad already introduced, I'm AJ Ansari. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and one of the owners at DSWI. And in addition to being a Microsoft MVP, I am also the founder and the editor-in-chief of a news site on Copilot and Copilot Studio called onlycopilotfans.com, which you can visit. There's a lot of great information there about training AI models, about working with Copilot Studio in kind of new and innovative ways, and all the different changes that are coming down. So I advise you to check it out. Also, if you have any questions about my presentation today, the best way to get a hold of me is going to be on LinkedIn. So from the QR code that you see on the screen or from the bit.ly link that you have, you can use either of those to find me there. Of course, I think there may be a few minutes after we finish today to answer some questions that you might have as well. So Bismillah wa nabda, and let's jump straight into our slides. So I always like to start the conversation with a little bit of housekeeping because there's some terms that we use all the time, and some of those are interchangeable. And if you think about the word chatbot that gets thrown a lot around a lot, it's a conversational bot, a conversational experience. But more recently, I think you've seen in our world the terms copilot and agent get thrown around as well. In the concept of this particular conversation, or the context of this particular conversation, it is very synonymous. It's one and the same. But in a larger context, they're not one and the same, right? I think Microsoft has often explained it as every user has a copilot, and each function in an organization can be solved by one or more agents. So if you have a customer service function, that can have multiple agents that handle the different functions within it. But each user would have a copilot, and that copilot would act in their voice and do the things that they need to do, etc. Another thing I want to highlight is when you first saw the title of the session, it said Azure OpenAI Service. And originally, that was the kind of general scope. But as you'll see in my presentation today, Microsoft, after Ignite, renamed that larger service to called the Azure AI Foundry. That is the platform, that is the Munasabah, and then on top of that, in that platform, we have both the Azure OpenAI service and the Azure AI service, which I'll explain. And it is a service or platform from where we can build our copilots or agents or Gen AI apps, etc. That is one of the three platforms that I said we were going to talk about. Also, I wanted to highlight one other thing, that if you see the title Custom GPT and you go into Google and you look for Custom GPT, you might actually find a website called customgpt.ai. That is not what we're talking about. The platform that we are talking about is the custom GPT capabilities of ChatGPT from OpenAI. So just I want to make sure that we are on the same page when we are talking about these terms. So another thing that I wanted to do, I don't know what level of skills the folks who are attending today's session have. Some people might be very far along in their journey, and for some people, this might be the beginning, right? This is at the end of the day, a boot camp, and we bring in people of all different skill levels. So I thought this was an interesting way to start the conversation. I remember about a year and a half ago, I was sitting in at a conference where somebody from Microsoft presented something very similar, and I found it very interesting. And when you think about topics of AI or الذكاء الاصطناعي, we often just use that general word, artificial intelligence, or sometimes you hear the word AGI, artificial general intelligence. And within that are contained so many other terms that are very important and distinct. So some of them are subsets of the other. So machine learning, for instance, is a subset of artificial intelligence. And within machine learning is deep learning. And within deep learning is generative AI and then LLMs. So on the right-hand side, I have some small definitions. We're not going to bore you with a large lecture in it, but just a high-level primer, if you will. Artificial intelligence, what are these, right? These are rule-based systems. They've been around since the 1950s, and it, basically is algorithm-based. It's rule-based, it's algorithm-based, but when we get to that next level of machine learning, it can generate these algorithms. So the humans don't have to provide it an algorithm, but it can generate its own algorithms based on whatever data that's provided. right? So if you are training it to understand what a cat is or a dog is, you just give it a lot of different pictures of cats and dogs, and it will kind of, understand, and it will start, based on that data, it will start to learn. But where we start to get into more complex scenarios that we've seen evolve in the last, I think, decade or so, deep learning is a significant improvement in that area, which is you do not have to provide it preset rules. You don't have to tell it what it has to do. It can generate the algorithms based on data, but it doesn't have to have any rules to tell it. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, where we have really started picking up steam and this excitement around AI has become palpable, is that generative AI conversation where it can do much more than that, right? It can create content. It can create content from scratch. Traditionally, AI was great for pattern recognition. We've moved from that to where AI is now great for producing human-like content, whether it is in the form of images using tools like models such as diffusion models, like DALL-E, etc., which is a different thing than what generates text or generates music, etc. So within text, a good example of that could be like ChatGPT, right? That's a tool that we all know. LLMs are not the same as generative AI. They're a subset within that AI, generative AI. Generative AI can contain diffusion models, as I said before, music generation models, models that are strong on math. LLMs specifically focus on that one area where it is trained and the transformer is trained to understand and generate human-like text. It can use coherent human language. Now, some of these models, when paired with others, can also do reasoning, which is what we're hearing so much from ChatGPT's O3, O1, and the DeepSeek models, which are reasoning models. So I hope this slide was beneficial for you as well. So with that, let's go once again into the 3 contenders we're going to talk about. The first one is custom GPTs with ChatGPT. The second one is our copilots or agents with Copilot Studio. And the third one is the copilots with Azure OpenAI services I have said here, or Azure AI Foundry. So what I like to do right around this time is take a little bit of time to show you each one of these in action, starting with our ChatGPT and building custom GPTs. So let's go into our workplace. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily suspend my my presentation, and I'll bring up my web browser. So here I have in my web browser a standard ChatGPT experience. Now I have a paid account. On the left-hand side in my navigation pane, I have some history from my previous chats. And then up top, I've got some other things that I've built before. As an example, in preparation for today's session, I built a little chat agent called Trade Genius. Now, I'm not going to use that just yet. I have that handy in case the internet doesn't work. Something goes wrong with the demonstration. I always like to have a backup. But we're actually going to make one from scratch. So let's imagine for a second that we want to be able to create a custom GPT that is an expert on international trade law. Now, to be able to answer our questions, it can use its own general knowledge, but we can also give it some very specific documents that we have to be able to answer questions. So a word that you sometimes hear in the AI world is called grounding in knowledge. So you're going to ground it in or grounding it on specific knowledge that you've provided. All right, so I'm going to go to my icon here and say my GPTs, and we will create a GPT here. Now you could configure or you can describe to create it. And this is where I think AI is improving leaps and bounds. You can tell it what it needs to do, and then it can actually do some of those things for you, right? So here I'm going to say you are an international trade expert. Or better yet, I just remembered that I copied some of these prompts in the interest of time to a notepad, which will make my life and your life a lot easier so I don't have to sit and talk and type all of these. So create an agent with expertise in international trade laws and a strong understanding of guidelines by the World Trade Organization. As I do this, it's going to prompt and ask me if I have a certain name. And what it will also do is it will create a set of what are called starter prompts for you, questions that somebody interested in talking to the international trade expert may typically want to ask. So it's doing some updates here on the left-hand side, and as it finishes doing that, it'll say, oh, should we use this name? Sure, why not? Let's do that. And you see on the right-hand side, it has some of these guidelines. Now, this is a playground or a preview area where I can test how it works. So if I want to ask it some questions, I can do that. But before I ask it questions, right now, whatever it knows is what the general knowledge of this particular ChatGPT experience is. So this is nothing unique. This is probably stuff that it could have answered even in a regular chat. So our next step would be to ground that in our own knowledge so that there's some specific, unique value here that we're providing. So here we go into configure. Now you notice here from our question, it's already created a set of instructions. Instructions used to not have a lot of value about a year ago, but now as these AI models are becoming smarter, they can reason over what you're providing. So these instructions become invaluable. Instructions are as important as, say, you hire a new intern or a young college graduate and you're trying to train them on things. These instructions can sometimes be the equivalent of training, and it can use this as guidance on how to handle situations. This particular example obviously does not have much complexity here, but come down, you see these conversation starters or starter prompts that are noted here. And then you can upload knowledge. This is where if you have some specific documents, and I have a couple of examples here, like a deep trade agreements handbook that we have, which is about 500-600 pages of information on international trade that we have as a specific resource. Or perhaps you are also a lawyer, and I was doing this as a proof of concept for a law firm, an international trade firm. So this actually was done in a real life proof of concept. And we needed to show them how your AI agent could use precedent from a court case to give them guidance on what can or cannot be done. So this was a court case trial outcome. So an opinion and order from the court. So perhaps we want to upload some of these documents. So what we can do is we can highlight these documents that we want to take and upload them. And it's going to read them into, and it basically breaks them down and vectorizes this information so that it can quickly return some answers related to it. So now if I wanted to ask and test how this would work, usually a good way you would test is by keeping this document open, and you may actually look for some specific things around this trial that you may want to ask about. So let's say we want to know about the Qingdao Haiyan group. And let's get our case reference. Actually, that is not the case number, but let me just come back over to the first page. Maybe that was a case number. Now, this may or may not work. I actually have no specific idea. I'm testing out. And this is where if it doesn't work, then you go out and you decide what else do you need to change. What you will find, though, here we lucked out that it was actually able to answer some questions related to what I asked. If it doesn't, in a tool like ChatGPT, or when you're using this custom GPT capability, I cannot fine tune. I cannot train this to handle things a different way. This is a very important distinction in this particular tool, that what works will work. And in general, it works well. But what doesn't work, you don't have a lot of opportunities to train and get it to do things differently. The only options at hand you have are often changing the document you're providing, making changes to the document, or perhaps using some instructions to give it some other guidance. But there's a limit to what you can do. You can't tell it once that you are wrong with this answer and expect it to understand and remember that and correct itself in the future. Now, over here, besides some knowledge that you provide, you can also use other capabilities like web search, which is native to ChatGPT. This is a distinct feature. I'm going to come back to this later because this is a strength that this tool has that some of the other platforms don't. And then some of its other things like the diffusion model of DALL-E, which can generate images, or if you wanted to be able to analyze and interpret code, you can. What you can also do is you can create actions. An action could allow you to get information from another website, another source. So let's say, for instance, you had to get some information about court cases, and there is another court case website with a database and an API, and you want to connect and get that. You could come in here as long as you know how to write your OpenAI schema, or you could also get help from a tool called Actions GPT, where you can describe an Actions GPT. I had actually described one as an example for UPS Shipment Tracking API, and it was able to come up with a schema for me in this example. So I could copy this YAML schema, and then I could dump this in over here. Or there's some simple examples too, like a weather JSON YAML and so on that I could try and test. But in the interest of time, some of these are not nearly as important. So we're going to say we want to create this. And when we create this, then we can share this with other people. Now it's giving me a little error here simply because I've plugged it into some knowledge sources and a schema and an action, but I have not created a privacy policy. So for now, I'm going to say this is only for me. We're not going to expose this to other people. Otherwise, I'd have to upload a policy, privacy policy document as a standard and a good practice. I create this, and at this point, this is now available for me to use in the future. So I could come down here. Now this tool is available. It says that this is mine. If I publish this, this would be available to anybody. I also want to highlight something here since we're talking to an Arabic audience. Alhamdulillah, we're now at a time that we can actually get most of these tools to not just answer our questions in Arabic, but to create the entire experience in Arabic. So if you were creating an agent, and you simply said, I want to create an agent that's going to talk to me or respond to my questions in Arabic. This could have been the International Trade Law Advisor. Your guide could still have been in English, but you could have had it answer questions in Arabic. So as a starting point, I'm going to go in. We won't actually finish the second custom GPT, but I'm just going to say here, create, and we will say in here that we need a GPT that can talk to me in Arabic, use words that are more common in the Khaliji dialect as opposed to something that's more Shami or Masri. And so based on that, you'll find that the vocabulary it uses will also match and correspond to what the user would probably respond to a lot better. Or you could probably use the traditional or the modern standard Arabic if you're trying to do it for just about anybody under the sun. So as it does it, you will see that it will start showing you information in the preview window, and it's going to give you starter prompts that are also in Arabic. And as I said before, even if you had used a knowledge article in here that was an English document, it would be able to answer that question for you in Arabic. And that is actually a very strong point with some of these AI tools. So that concludes the first part of my presentation, which is the presentation on the ChatGPT or custom GPT building with ChatGPT. So what was our second tool that we had talked about, just to kind of bring us back to it? The second tool was Copilot Studio and building copilots and agents. This is going to be another very interesting presentation because this actually goes into a few different lanes. This is Microsoft's sweetheart tool. This is your favorite tool. For anybody who watched Microsoft Ignite, which was Microsoft's flagship conference for customers and partners in Chicago last November. I had the good fortune of speaking there. I was a presenter and I presented a session on best practices for building Copilot Studio agents. But at that conference, the bulk of the attention went to Copilot and Copilot Studio. So even though Microsoft has other tools that are more powerful, Microsoft looks at this as the standard experience because it addresses everything from the most simple tasks to tasks that are considerably complex, perhaps not the highest complexity, but still considerably complex. So it is a low-code, no-code tool. And as we all know, Microsoft is very much in favor of low-code, no-code. We're all gathered here today as part of the Global Power Platform Bootcamp, which is all low-code and no-code. So this is the tool of choice. Now, there are some limitations. I'll talk about those as well when we get to the slides. But for now, let's see this in action, and let's see a couple of different scenarios that we can engage in with this particular tool. So back over here, let's leave our ChatGPT windows aside, and I'm going to go into my Copilot Studio environment. Now, over here, I've got some different examples of things that I want to show you and work with. Oh, sorry, I was trying to get out of my presentation mode. Let's try this down. Wonderful. So a couple of things. I'll show you some agents that I first built, and then we'll also build one from scratch. So as an example, on my onlycopilotfans.com website, there is an agent that I built and that we publish. It's called Ask AJ, which is a play on my name, right? And so this particular agent is designed to answer questions about Copilot Studio licensing. It can answer questions about Copilot Studio in general. It can answer questions about the Power Platform. So you notice over here, there's some instructions that have been populated. This is your name. You always respond in the first person. You provide accurate and up-to-date information on so and so. And then all of this information is going to be backed up. These instructions are going to be backed up by knowledge sources. In ChatGPT, we were only able to add knowledge sources that were documents like a PDF or a Word file or so on. In Copilot Studio, we can be a little more powerful. Not only does it support websites, the documents, but it also supports public websites. And it also supports other kinds of structured data that you might have in Dataverse and a series of other external connectors. So you can create an Azure AI search if you're an experienced Azure person, or you can connect to an Azure SQL source, or also some common platforms like ServiceNow and Salesforce, etc. But typically, you're going to be dancing between public websites, files that you upload, or things that are in SharePoint. Why would you have the choice between files that you can upload and SharePoint? Because SharePoint would contain a PDF file and files you upload would contain a PDF file. Well, it's kind of the way it stores all of this. If you're uploading a file, these files are going to be broken down and stored into Dataverse, and they'll be vectorized. But if they're in SharePoint, it does a much better job of semantic indexing and vectorization of those files. It takes longer, but you're going to get much better outcomes of search results for the documents that you're working with. Now, some of those vectorization and semantic indexing capabilities only work if you have a Copilot for Microsoft 365 license. I don't want to go too much into licensing. If you want to have a conversation, just reach out to me. I can give you a soup to nuts, as they say, kind of tutorial on licensing with Copilot Studio. But with public websites, we can also connect to specific websites that we care about. Herein is another important distinction. With ChatGPT, when I'm connecting to when I have a new agent that I'm building, I can say use web search capabilities. And what this does is it just searches anywhere on the internet and it can give an answer. Copilot Studio by design is created for business and organizational use. So it does not by default search every website out there. It cannot do it, not because it doesn't know how to, it's because it is intentionally locked down and made to not do it. However, you can then specify specific links. And what happens here is it basically runs a Bing search. So the website still needs to be indexed. It will run a Bing search within that particular website. So if I had a website like Microsoft.com, it will search under Microsoft.com. If I had learn.microsoft.com, it would only look under learn.microsoft.com, but it would not search www.microsoft.com. And those things can become very important when you're working with it. So here is an example. I have a handful of, a website, some documents, some other websites like the Microsoft Learn for Power Platform. And there's also limitations to how deep you can go. Notice too that I've got some descriptions here. These descriptions are very important, especially if you're going to use AI orchestration. What is AI orchestration? It is when you have all of these different sources of knowledge, like documents, and maybe you have some actions, and you in the conversation want AI to decide when somebody asks a question, how do I create a new topic in Copilot Studio, right? So here I'm going to ask a question of my of this agent, and this is in my test sandbox. It's not actually deployed here yet. How does it know which document to look at to answer? Where does it go? So you can either use something called topics, where I can orchestrate or guide the conversation through a series of kind of things I've trained it when these types of questions are asked, and go down over here and look here, check this document. Or I can enable something called AI orchestration. And if I enable my AI orchestration, or it's also available here on my home screen, AI will take over and decide which is the best document or action it should check for the answer that it needs. If I say over here, use generative AI to respond how to best handle the users and events. If you use that, then it needs a strong description to know what the source is. So the knowledge description has to be strong. You have to explain what it is. If you've created actions, an action is when you want to maybe connect to email or connect to another system. So you can use from a large set of actions that are available. Think of these as the same connectors that you have in Power Apps and Power Automate. Those connectors are being exposed over here as well. And so you can search and you can say, if I needed to connect and get some data from Business Central or from the weather service or some other services you're searching, you're finding all of those. But for each of the things that you do, then you need to have a good description for it to understand, the AI to understand how it's going to work. So this, as I'm in the interest of time, I'm not actually going to create another action here. But when you create these types of agent experiences, you also then want to be able to deploy them somewhere. So where can you deploy them? You can deploy these agents in a wide variety of places. Unlike ChatGPT's agents, which only get added into ChatGPT itself, typically, you can have these custom agents be deployed into Teams, on your own website, in a mobile app, on Facebook, Twilio, etc., in a wide variety of places. So these are more flexible. If you're deploying them in a place like Microsoft Teams, for instance, I'm going to bring in one of my Teams windows that I preloaded. You will see over here a couple of different ways or a couple of different experiences. Of course, here is a little Copilot tab that I have within my Teams, so I can see my deployed agents are over here. We actually, at my organization, our employees use a Copilot Studio created agent to get questions or answers about our health benefits. So if somebody wants to know about our dental coverage, for instance, they can use this, or they can type in and ask, and it will look for information on the dental coverage plan, and it can provide them. They can ask about the maximum coverage limits. They can ask about the customer service phone number for dental coverage. All of those things are available, and then it links back to this type of source document. So you can deploy things into Microsoft Teams that are running in the Copilot chat. You can also deploy that as its own app. So this is just like talking to another person in your Microsoft Teams. I am just chatting with it, not in the Copilot area. I can have other humans in this chat as well, and we can ask questions. This is another one that we created and deployed, which is answering questions about creating APIs. So we have a book on API creation that we used as a knowledge source, and then we're getting that information. So, and then lastly, another type of experience that you can have is experiences that are embedded inside of Copilot for Microsoft 365. So that is the Copilot that when you license, that helps you get things in Word and Excel, or the chat experience that Microsoft heavily advertises as Copilot. So if you're in here, you can deploy those experiences right over here. So our BC Field Guide is deployed in here as a as one of the examples, and somebody can come and they can start asking questions about Business Central. They can look at other apps that are available to them as well. So if somebody wants to add more apps that are available across the organization, they can come into the apps area, and I'll just wait for it to answer. See, this is getting the answer from the knowledge source that we've provided, and we'll show what book or what document it got this information from. If you have created and published apps across your organization or for your organization, your employees can actually come over here. Let me go back for a second. I didn't want to come here. Get more apps. Yep. And then it should say built for your org. So it will show applications that have been built and certified for your organization. Your employees can safely download and start using that. So if I were to create a very simple agent here in Copilot Studio from scratch, let's see what that experience looks like as well, just like I did for the ChatGPT experience. So here I'm in my home area. I can either describe my agent to create it, or more often than not, we would say create. And then over here, I can say specifically what I'm trying to do. Once again, I will use the international trade kind of laws type of prompt here, and we'll start creating that. So I'm going to type that prompt in. And unlike the ChatGPT experience, this can ask you a lot more questions. It can ask you a lot more follow-up stuff. Fine, is this the name you want? Yes, that works. And then it will ask me questions like, are there things you want it to do or don't want it to do? And so I can say over here, all questions should have citations and detailed answers. And I can have, more things like that. If you're making something for children, my 11-year-old daughter, she likes to make some agents, and she likes to have those agents talk to her with emojis and explain it like a 6th grader. It actually makes a difference when you tell it as an instruction, explain these answers as a 6th grader. It understands the audience, and then it doesn't give more complex answers. So do you want it to communicate in a formal, in a friendly, communicate in an informal tone? So at some point, if you're done with answering the questions that you needed to do, in the interest of time, we're going to say after this, just go ahead and create it. It says, do you want to point to a website? And so if I had a specific website I wanted it to get information from, I could do that, but I'm just going to say create. So it'll create the agent. And then I'll have some other options that I can populate that I did not have working with my ChatGPT experience. So of course, the instructions that we created got populated. I then have the ability to use AI orchestration. I'm going to enable that. I'm then going to, okay, I got to wait for a second here. I just got a little hurried up, so. Of course, all the errors always happen when you're doing a live demonstration, right? It never happens when you're doing your own testing. So, and then I can add some knowledge. So the documents that I had before, I can drag and drop here in this particular instance. But what I'll also do is I will go and point it to, in a second, a website. And we're just going to take my Only Copilot Fans website as an example. And so because it does not search the external internet already, and this is the only thing that I have over here, there's not too many knowledge sources, so I'm not going to worry about giving it a very specific description. I will just say, let's start this chat. And let's see what it does. So it's going to look at whatever knowledge sources are available to it, and then it comes up and it starts to give some answers. Now, these answers are often coming from the knowledge sources that you're doing, but I also have general knowledge enabled, so it will also check its own general knowledge. This is running on GPT-4o from OpenAI. It is a fine-tuned model of GPT-4o, just so you know. And then if you wanted to add some actions, as I said, actions can connect it to external applications, external data sources. Triggers can make your experience autonomous. And then topics are what you can do to create a more orchestrated experience where when a user specifically uses these words, I want you to do A, B, C, D, and E, and I want these conditions to be met. I want you to do this type of data collection and so on. So then I want to leave this experience and go into my third experience, which is the Copilot building with Azure OpenAI service. So I'm not going to bring back the PowerPoint slide. I'm just going to jump straight into my Azure experience. So here, just so you know, if you are not yet ready to build anything with Azure, AI Foundry or Azure OpenAI service, the most powerful feature, most powerful reason why you may want to consider it, if you haven't thought about it before, is that you get to select from very different models. Everything that we have done before when we were working with ChatGPT, we could not select the data model. When we were working with Copilot Studio, it did not let us choose the model. The model was always GPT-4o. But when you're working with Azure AI Foundry, one of the first starting points is you choose from one of the models that are available. Now, there are two types of approaches you have. One is called the Azure OpenAI service. And if you're going to use the Azure OpenAI service, you have a selection of about 18 models that you can use from its catalog. And these are, or 25 actually, used to be 18. These are models that are primarily from the OpenAI background, which is why it's called the Azure OpenAI service. These are created by the Microsoft shared investment with OpenAI. So you see the O3s, the GPT-3.5 Turbo. These also are typically cheaper than the other models that are out there. Because you have the ability to choose a model, you also are going to have to take the responsibility of the cost of the model. O3, it could be more expensive, and GPT-3.5 is probably going to be the least expensive. These models cannot really be fine-tuned. You can't do much with it here. But if you go to the other larger catalog that Azure AI Foundry has, which is available under, just by saying full model catalog, this has 1,837 models, including DeepSeek that everybody's talking about, including Microsoft's 5.4, including Mistral, including the various open source Llama type of models. And when you select one of these models to work with, in most of these cases, you'll also have the opportunity to then fine tune. So not every model is fine tunable, but some models are, so you can try which ones are. And as you go through this, you may select a model and you can see which ones are fine tuned, or you can use the filter. When you can fine tune, that's when you are taking your own data and you can start training it, and you can start giving it more and more information so it learns and it understands better. I had brought up this website called the GitHub Marketplace because this is a perfect place for you to try and understand which model is the right one for your use. Remember, I showed you that slide that said there are generative AI, and within it was LLMs, because there's other things as well. So you may have something that is best solved with an LLM, and you might have other situations that need a different type of model. And you may not be sure which models are best. So you can take them for a test drive by going to github.com/marketplace. Go to models, and for instance, try out DeepSeek, maybe, and then compare that against 5.4, which is a small language model, and it's more focused around math tasks. So I come here and I say playground. I do not have to put my credit card. I do not have to pay anything. And then I can say compare and choose another model that I wanted to compare it against. So here, let me maybe try Microsoft's 5.4. So now I've got this model on this side, this model on this side, and then I can ask it a question and say, count the number of days between November 1, 2025 and December 4, 2026, including start and end date. And you would be thinking, why am I asking this? A lot of the models that are out there sometimes will make mistakes on simple arithmetic when that arithmetic number becomes big, because it's a reasoning issue. It has to understand that each month has so many days, and then it has to do the math. Simple enough, but sometimes it gets overconfident. I have documented examples of where 4.0 will sometimes give you an off answer, but 0.1 or 0.1 mini will actually give you a better answer. So come down over here now, let me structure it. It's giving it, and it will say, it should be able to say this is 402 days. Let's see what this says. Now, with any luck, we're both going to get the same answer here. And if it doesn't, and this is taking a little bit longer, what DeepSeek has a habit of doing is it actually shows all of its work, because it's also a reasoning model. This is not a reasoning model, so it doesn't show its work as much in detail. Look at how it's saying, like, starting at this and this, but hold on, let's do this, then let's do that. So it's kind of coming up with all of it. So in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is not wait for it to look at this. 399 days. It actually, they said, but wait, let me check again. It's like a human thinking. This is quite literally the types of things that go in the back of her mind. It can be a little slow, but it is still thinking. So now at some point, it will come up. So it still thinks it's 399. So it could be that 5.4 has a wrong answer. But this is why you sometimes want to compare models. You may actually have your correct information. You want to test how each of these will work. There's only so much you can test. They won't let you just run thousands of tests on it. It's also going to show you how many messages were created. Messages is the unit of how these AI models are costed. So you can see where this model is using more messages than the other one, or so on and so forth. But how do you actually create one? Now, let's say you've decided DeepSeek is the one you would like to use, and you want to go ahead and do it. Or you decided you want to use from the Azure OpenAI service one of the O3 or GPT 3.5 models. So you can come to the model catalog. You would pick the model that you're interested in. You would say deploy. This requires registration. Let me go pick one that does not require registration. It will be quicker. So GPT 3.5 Turbo. I'm just going to give this a quick name, GPPB KSA, and deploy. And we can open it in Playground if we want to. Otherwise, we can go straight into the chat area and pull this from the deployment, and then we can start testing. We can add other, fine-tuning that we may be interested in doing. If the model is fine-tunable, this is where we add more of our data. We can kind of test with images. We can add knowledge sources and all the other things that we can do with Copilot Studio. This experience is more comprehensive, but this experience takes more developer background, and it also requires that you understand how AI models work in general. Why do I say that? Because you have the ability to change how it responds and how many parameters it holds, the temperature and the p-values. These types of things control the nature of the response. In Copilot Studio, I don't have all of these toggles to control the hallucination and the type of response. Instead, for relevance tracking, I only have this measurement. Let me go back over here. It says low, medium, or high moderation. When I change one of these, high moderation means it hallucinates the least. It also means it applies the most strict responsible AI content filters. Low is quite the other end of the spectrum. ChatGPT does not have any of those, does not even give you the option to change them. Azure AI Foundry will give you the ability to change this behavior as well, in addition to allowing you to fine-tune the models with your own data in some cases. So with this high-level demonstration, now I'm going to go into PowerPoint slides, and what I've done is created some very good summaries with each of these one by one. So first, custom GPT that we looked at, it's developed by OpenAI, and it's built on ChatGPT's LLMs. Now, it typically is using right now still GPT 4.0 for creating custom GPTs. Although when you are in the standard ChatGPT experience, you can choose from the 0.1, the 0.3, and any other ones that are available to you based on your subscription. As we saw, you can ground it on your custom knowledge, which means you can upload a file or a document, and it can answer questions based on what's contained in those. And you can build custom actions. The custom actions are not as friendly to build because you have to know how to write YAML or JSON. And that is not always something that people know how to do. The good news is ChatGPT has its own YAML builder, which you can just type to describe and it will build it for you. 90% of the time it works all the time. So you still have to know some YAML or JSON to troubleshoot. It can do web search and image generation. Web search is native to ChatGPT, so if you ask it to allow it, it will. It does have a code interpreter for data analysis. And one nice thing is that most experiences in your ChatGPT will have in-conversation memory. And so what that means is twofold. One, in the context of the conversation you're having, it will remember previous things that you have typed. Let's just go back in here if I type in something like this, it will remember what I have put in because it puts this as a folder or saved conversation. And in addition, they also have the ability here called Customize ChatGPT. And here you can train it to hold some things about you in memory that it will remember. So that is one benefit that you can have that you can use to your advantage. Now let's go back into my slides once again. And then the downside, however, is it lacks something called EDP, which is basically Microsoft's terminology for enterprise data protection. And I want you to think of that as a guarantee that your data is not going to be used to fine-tune or to train It's foundational models. When you're building a custom GPT, you're given the option to say yes or no. When you're building it with Copilot Studio, that is not even a choice. So, and any conversations that you have are secure and never leave your tenant with Copilot Studio. Here, there is no guarantee. Now, also, if you had built an agent in Azure AI with GPT-4o as the model, Copilot Studio already uses GPT-4o as its model, and Custom GPT also uses GPT-4o as its model, and you ask it the same questions, you will find that you will get slightly different answers because of the way they're fine-tuned, but you'll also find that if you ask controversial answers, Custom GPT will be more likely to answer them, your Copilot Studio will be least likely to answer them, and your Azure AI Foundry generated agent will answer depending on how you have trained those parameters I was showing you earlier. The custom GPT is great at RAG. RAG is basically retrieval augmented generation. I just want you to think of it, the ability to retrieve data from documents. Even with large files, it has a much better recall, much better ability to parse through an answer. And of course, you can publish this for yourself or GPT Store. I find that this is the lowest learning curve, which means you can take somebody who has very little knowledge of AI with very little training. In fact, everything you saw today, you could probably go back in a minute, start building your custom GPTs. It's also got the quickest time to value. But the downside is this lives outside of your business's tenant, which means it is not always going to be the best way to work with. Copilot Studio, developed by Microsoft, runs on a custom version of GPT-4o. You can ground it with knowledge, custom knowledge and topics. And this knowledge can be files, web sites, Dataverse, structured data, SharePoint. You can build actions with Power Platform connectors like flows from Power Automate, create custom skills, limited web searchability in that only websites that you specify can be searched, not every website on the internet. You can deploy to multiple channels. Pricing is done by what's called a message. So every question answered is a message, but some messages can be as expensive as 30 messages. Some answers can be as expensive as 30 messages. In the US, each message is 1 cent. But if you're creating a customer service agent, it can get very expensive very fast. So you want to make sure that you're testing. I did not have a chance to spend a lot of time on this, but you can build autonomous agents. And this is, you do not need conversation. You train it with instructions, you walk away. If an email comes, it will handle the email. It can reason over the email, respond to the email. You don't have to even tell it what to respond with a full set of like a document. You just give it instructions. If this happens, do this, and it will then answer as if a human understood what you're doing. It's low code, no code, strongest guardrails. It is a little weaker at times on larger files if you upload as a knowledge source, so you have to break them down into smaller files. Quick overview of Azure AI Foundry, developed by Microsoft. If you use the OpenAI service, that's in conjunction with OpenAI's models. As you saw, anywhere from 25 to 1,800 models. You can fine-tune and train some models. They have different types of models available. You can fine-tune, you can kind of train and customize its behavior. You can allow it to show web searches or restrict them. You can extend the guardrails, and we didn't cover that very much. It's a more advanced topic. And the pricing here is token-based. In the AI world, when you look at models like Llama, OpenAI stuff, Phi, DeepSeek, all of them measure your cost in tokens. And some agents, some of these models are better at using fewer tokens, and some use a lot. And there's a lot of flexibility in how you can deploy this, just like it was with the Copilot Studio. It's got a steep learning curve, highest ceiling, and it's probably also going to be the highest cost for deploying and using those agents. So when to use which platform? Here we're quickly kind of wrapping up. Custom GPTs with ChatGPT is great if you're a single contributor. If you're building something for your own use or for broader public interest, not for a business, there's no need for topic creation or conversation orchestration. You don't need specific kind of workflows, trees that you need to go into. You do not need access to data in the Microsoft 365 tenant. You don't need it to work with your SharePoint or your Microsoft Power Automate flows, Dataverse data, etc. If that's not required, this is probably a great place to start. It's very flexible. The costs are next to nothing. All you need is a pro license, which is about in the US $20. Copilot agents with Copilot Studio, great for an organization, for your customers, or in an organization for your own employees. You can deploy it to Teams, Slack, your company portal. You can have authentication control so that only people who have your multi-factor authentication with Microsoft Entra ID require it, or you can disable it. If you want to work with data in the M365 tenant, this is the quickest and best way to do it. It works with your Power Platform connectors out of the box. You can orchestrate with topics, and it can become autonomous. And you can build declarative agents. As I said, you can create this experience so that the file works in Copilot, or your Copilot agents work inside of the Copilot just by calling that. So the one Copilot they have standard that can access the traditional stuff as well as your custom agents. And it's low code and no code, or no code. And then finally, with Azure AI Foundry, most flexibility. You get to pick your models. You need to define your own guardrails. It's great for enterprise level projects where cost is less of a concern. It may still be a concern, but less. You have to be willing to learn to be and work like a pro. So with that, I may have gone a few minutes over. My apologies, but I'll open up the floor to any questions. As always, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Check out Only Copilot Fans for some great answers. And Ustad Muhammad, I'm going to turn this over to you.